Okay, gentlemen, how about lamination? Is obviously I've seen most of the best work I've seen have come on lamination. People love that matte lam with that glossy contrast, but there's a lot of different things that are related to issues with some laminations. What kinds of I guess limitations have you guys experienced? Ken, we'll start with you.
Yeah, laminates could look great. Obviously, soft touch laminates can look fantastic. Contrast I talked about earlier becomes tremendous on a soft touch laminate. I think for me, the biggest concern is what kind of laminator were you using? You need to obviously consider heat and curl because, like I said earlier, you cannot get a curly sheet under inkjet heads. So making sure that you get the temperature just right, that your finished product lays flat, and that it can go into the machine comfortably is a very big concern.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. How about you, Matt? What have you kind of seen with the lamination?
Lamination issues are widespread, and either it's just not a full lamination or you get the ragged edges because the blade didn't clean cut it. That creates issues with double feed. But as far as appeal and use, people seem to gravitate towards the soft touch laminates more. It's just you're adding the reverse tactile effect to the other tactile effect. You've got the complete 180 going on, and we create some really sexy pieces, particularly with a lot of contrast or very dark colors or just black. We'll print a sheet black, laminate it with a soft touch laminate. It just looks like black felt, and then you put that shiny foil that's raised on top of it, and it's just the pow effect is amazing. People love it. Any hot lamination that I've used of any finish has worked. I've been able to make it work. The other issues that occur surrounding the use of it usually have to do with it creates an overspec. If you're putting it on 18 point now, you're beyond the thickness of the stock that you can send through the machine. And of course, the ragged edges. And another thing that I do is I put Japanese crop marks down the edges of all my sheets. Because if I have to resort to, I'm referring to the MGI, of course, grid mode, then I have those markers to use for grid mode for exact registration, regardless of how it's reading that sheet. If it's too shiny, it's getting sparklies. The AIS can't see through the shininess or whatever. That can create issues. Then we can refer to those marks on the edge. When using a laminate for the iGen 5, which has the oil from the fuser, it requires a specific type of laminate, and it only comes in specific widths, or it's only available locally here that way. So if the laminate doesn't cover those marks, the hot rollers reduplicate them along the edges of the sheet, and then the scanner is totally blown away. It has no idea what it's looking at. So there's just a lot of little things you have to look for when you're dealing with lamination that could totally blow the job and make the whole thing worthless, and you have to start over. So the lamination must cover the marks so that they don't reduplicate from the hot rollers on the laminator. And something that absolutely will not work is cold laminate. We use that internally. It's called luster lam, and it's generally used as a sign making or more of an object production cover rather than a paper coating. But we did test it, and it fails miserably. It doesn't hold varnish at all.
So that's the next thing. I don't know if you guys ran into it, but I think dine level is a real thing when it comes to laminate rolls. And unfortunately, it has a shelf life, just like foil has a shelf life. Laminate also tends to have a shelf life, and the dine levels will start dipping after it's gone past its prime. So I think also when you're buying your laminate, number one, make sure that you're getting that sell by date. Make sure you know what you're looking at, and number two, if you're using something that you have in stock, track how long it's been on that shelf. It's been on that shelf for 2-3 years. you might have some flow issues, you might have some adherability issues that are linked to the dye level. So I mean, those are real issues. And of course, as you mentioned, getting the right laminate to stick to the right ink. Some laminates stick better to iGen, others, for IS-29 or KM1 or HP, each have like specific types of laminates that are required to be able to bond with their inks. So really good point. Thank you, gentlemen.
I would also like to add one real quick thing to consider when you're using laminate is a lot of people are using single sheet cutters for their cutting of the dimensional products. Pretty much laminate is a no-go on most of those machines. So you need to be thinking about die cutting or very carefully guillotine cutting these sheets. So it's an important thing to keep in mind when you're designing.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much, and we will see you very soon.